The Great Hall of Galactic Council Station Nexus 7 was a sight that still made Jinwoo Park's breath catch in his throat. Massive crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity, their surfaces glowing with soft blue light. Floating platforms carried delegates from dozens of species, each one more strange and wonderful than the last. Jinwoo adjusted his simple black uniform and checked his notes one more time. Today was important. Today humanity would finally get the chance to join the Galactic Defense Alliance. At least, that was the plan. "Stop looking so nervous," whispered Hyjin Lee, the senior diplomat walking beside him. Her voice was calm, but Jinwoo could see the tension in her shoulders. "Remember, we belong here just as much as they do." Behind them, Sung-In Kim marched with military precision. The Earth Defense Force commander kept his face blank, but his eyes never stopped moving. He was counting exits, watching for threats, doing what soldiers do. Jinwoo found that oddly comforting. The youngest member of their team, Mingi Choi, walked at the back of the group. The xenobiologist was only 25, but she knew more about alien species than anyone else on Earth. Her job was to help them understand the cultural differences that might affect the negotiations. "Remember," Hyjin said quietly, "the Velthani communicate through light patterns in their crystal bodies. Bright flashes mean anger. The Korthok think as one mind, so they might all speak at once. And the Zephyrians are pure energy beings who think we're barely smarter than rocks." Sung-In finished. "Got it." They entered the main chamber, and Jinwoo felt very small. The room was huge, with delegates floating or sitting on platforms, arranged in a circle. At the center, a massive holographic display showed maps of the galaxy, with red dots marking areas of concern. Chairman Velthar of the Velthani stood at the center podium. His crystal body was 12 feet tall and shaped like a giant diamond. Light pulsed through him in slow, steady waves, the Velthani equivalent of being bored. "The human delegation may present their petition," Velthar announced. His voice came from speakers around the room, translated into dozens of languages. Hyjin stepped forward. "Honorable delegates, we come before you today to request membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance. Earth has been a peaceful member of the galactic community for 30 years. We have proven our commitment to a sharp buzz cutter off." The Korthok delegate cluster rippled with movement. Dozens of insect-like beings moved as one, their hive mind speaking in perfect unison. "The humans wish to join our alliance," they said, their voices creating an eerie harmony. "But what can they offer? Their ships are slow, their weapons are primitive, their technology is centuries behind ours." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates made sounds that the translators couldn't convert. Probably laughter. Jinwoo felt his face burn with embarrassment, but Hyjin stayed calm. "We may not have the most advanced technology, but we have proven ourselves capable. Our colonies are peaceful and productive. Our trade relationships are irrelevant," interrupted a voice like music made of wind chimes. The Zephyrian delegate was a swirling mass of golden light that hurt to look at directly. "Peace is easy when you have nothing worth fighting for. The humans have no real enemies because they pose no real threat." More sounds that might have been laughter. Jinwoo saw Sung-Yin's jaw tighten. "With respect," Sung-Yin said, stepping forward, "we have dealt with pirates and raiders in our space. Earth Defense Force ships have successfully what?" Chairman Velthar's crystal body flashed brighter. "Your ships use chemical rockets and metal bullets. Your computers are barely more advanced than counting machines. A single Velthani cruiser could destroy your entire fleet without effort." The chamber erupted in what were definitely sounds of amusement. Jinwoo watched delegates from species he couldn't even identify making gestures that were probably the alien equivalent of pointing and laughing. "That's not the point," Hyjin said, raising her voice. "The alliance is supposed to be about mutual protection and cooperation. We're not asking to lead your fleets. We're asking to be part of something bigger than ourselves." "But why should we want you?" asked a new voice. This came from the Krillian delegate, a being that looked like a cross between a spider and a tree. "You offer nothing we need. Your species is weak, divided, and primitive. You still fight wars among yourselves." "That's not true anymore," Minji said quietly. Jinwoo was surprised to hear her speak. She was supposed to be there just to observe. "Did the child say something?" The Krillian's voice dripped with contempt. Mingi stepped forward, her young face flushed but determined. "I said that's not true. Humans stopped fighting major wars decades ago. We've learned to work together, and we're not weak, we're adaptable. We survive in environments that would kill most species. We solve problems in ways others don't think of." "Adorable," the Zephyrian hummed. "The young one thinks creativity matters more than power." "It does," Sung-Yin said flatly. "In a real fight, creativity is what keeps you alive." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Chairman Velthar's body pulsed with what Mingi had told him was the Velthani equivalent of deep amusement. "A real fight," Velthar said. "Commander, your species has never faced a real enemy. Your greatest military achievement was defeating other humans with the same primitive weapons you use today. You know nothing of the threats that exist in this galaxy." "Then tell us," Jinwoo said, finally finding his voice. "If there are threats we don't know about, help us prepare. That's what alliances are for." "The boy speaks sense," came a new voice. This was from the mouth-rocky delegate, a being that looked like a living mountain of rock. Perhaps the humans could serve as ... scouts, expendable scouts. More laughter. Jinwoo felt sick. Actually, Sungyin said, his voice getting dangerously quiet. We've been tracking increased pirate activity in the outer rim sectors. The ships going missing, colonies going dark. Our patrol vessels have reported premature paranoia. Velter cut him off. You see threats where none exists because you don't understand the technology you're looking at. What you call pirate activity is probably just automated mining operations or weather control systems. We know the difference between. Sungyin started. You know nothing. The Korthok chorus interrupted. Your senses are crude. Your analysis is flawed. Your fears are the product of underdeveloped minds seeing monsters in shadows. Hyjin tried one more time. Honorable delegates, we're not asking for charity. We're willing to earn our place in the alliance. Give us a chance to prove ourselves. How? Asked the Zephyrian. By showing us how to build fire. By teaching us to bang rocks together. You have nothing we want. Humans, you are a curiosity at best, a species that barely discovered space travel before stumbling into our galaxy like children wandering into a library. Children who breed like vermin but fight like mice, added the Krillian. That was too much for some. You want to see how mice fight? He said, taking a step forward. Hyjin grabbed his arm. Commander, please. The chamber erupted in what were definitely sounds of mockery now. Jinwoo watched delegates from species across the galaxy laughing at them, dismissing them, treating them like entertaining pets. Chairman Velthar raised one crystal arm, and the noise died down. The petition is denied, he announced. The humans are not ready for membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance. Perhaps in a few centuries, when they have developed actual technology and outgrown their primitive emotional responses, we will reconsider. This session is closed, Velthar continued. The humans will escort themselves out. As they walked toward the exit, Jinwoo heard the conversation starting up behind them. Delegates talking about how amusing it had been to watch the primitive humans try to act like equals. Some were already placing bets on how long it would take for human civilization to collapse without their guidance. In the corridor outside, Hyjin finally let her professional mask slip. 30 years, she said quietly. 30 years of peaceful contact, and they still see us as animals. Let them, Sungyin said. His voice was calm now, but there was something cold in his eyes. Their mistake. Minji was quiet, but Jinwoo noticed she was taking notes on a small tablet. What are you writing? He asked. Everything, she said without looking up. Every species that was here today, every comment they made, every insult they threw at us. Someday they're going to regret treating us like this. You really think so? Jinwoo asked. Minji looked up at him, and for a moment her young face looked ancient. I know so, she said. Because they just made a very big mistake. What mistake? They underestimated us, she said simply. And in my experience, that's usually when the unexpected happens. As they boarded their ship for the long journey back to Earth, none of them knew how right she was about to be. 3 weeks after the humiliating meeting at the Galactic Council, Captain Doyeon was having a perfectly normal day. His cargo ship, the Soul's Pride, was making routine supply runs between human colonies and alien trading posts. It was boring work, but it paid well enough to keep his small crew happy. Captain, called out his navigation officer Sunho Park, we're getting a distress beacon from the Zephyrian Energy Sanctuary on Kepler 44b. Doyen frowned. The Zephyrians rarely asked for help from anyone, especially not humans. Their energy-based bodies made them nearly immortal, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans could build. What kind of distress? He asked. That's the weird part, Sunho said, checking his instruments. It's not a standard emergency code. It's just ... screaming. Dojon felt a chill run down his spine. Set course for Kepler 44b. Maximum speed. The Soul's Pride wasn't much to look at, a battered old cargo hauler that the aliens would have scrapped decades ago. But she was reliable, and right now that was what mattered. When they arrived at the sanctuary, Doyen knew something was terribly wrong. The normally brilliant energy fields that surrounded Zephyrian buildings were dim and flickering. The geometric patterns that decorated their structures looked broken, like someone had torn holes in them. Sunho scanned for life signs, Dojan ordered. I'm picking up maybe a dozen Zephyrians, Sunho reported, but they're barely registering. It's like they're fading. Doyun suited up and took a shuttle down to the surface. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Zephyrian Sanctuary was a place where their kind raised their young pure energy beings that looked like dancing flames. The adults who cared for them were usually so bright they hurt to look at. Now, they were dim shadows of themselves, barely alive. One of them, a being called Leandra, managed to communicate with him through their translation device. The children, she whispered, her voice like wind through broken glass. They took all the children. Who took them? Doyen asked. We don't know. They came in the night. No ships, no signals, just ... darkness. It drained us when we tried to fight. The young one screamed, and then they were gone. Doyon looked around the sanctuary. There should have been hundreds of young Zephyrians here, learning to control their energy forms. Instead, there was nothing but empty space and dying adults. He immediately sent a message to Earth Command. But by the time it reached them, similar reports were coming in from across the galaxy. On the crystal world of Velthar Prime, 12 young Velthani had vanished from their growth chambers. These weren't just any children, they were the future leaders of their civilization. Beings who took centuries to mature into their full crystal forms. The Korthok hive worlds were in chaos. 300 larvae had disappeared from their main breeding facility. For a species that thought as one mind, losing so many young was like having parts of their brain cut away. But the strangest thing was what hadn't happened. Not a single human child had been touched. Tae-Young Woo, Earth's intelligence analyst, spent sleepless nights going through the reports. His small office on Lunar Station was covered with star charts, incident reports, and photographs of the missing children. It doesn't make sense, he muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. Why skip the humans? His assistant, Young-ji Kim, brought him another cup of coffee. Maybe we're just lucky. No, Tae-Young said, shaking his head. This is too organized to be random. Someone is specifically targeting alien children while leaving human kids alone. But why? The answer came when he mapped out all the disappearances on a galactic chart. They weren't random at all, they formed a pattern, starting from the outer rim and moving inward toward the galactic core. It's a harvest, he realized with growing horror. Someone is collecting children from every major species, but they're saving humans for last. Meanwhile, emergency sessions were being called at the Galactic Council. The same delegates who had laughed at humanity just weeks before were now panicking as their most precious possessions, their children, vanished without a trace. Chairman Velthar's crystal body was flashing angry red patterns as he addressed the assembly. We must mobilize every ship, every weapon, every resource we have. Find the beings responsible for this atrocity and destroy them. The Korthok cluster buzzed with agitation. Our children are the future of our hive mind. Without them, we will diminish, we will fade. This is an attack on our very existence. The Zephyrians, their usual musical voices now harsh with pain, demanded immediate action. Deploy the energy fleets. Scan every system. Tear apart space itself if necessary. But find our young. But for all their advanced technology, the galactic powers found nothing. Their sensors, designed to track known energy signatures and biological markers, detected no trace of the kidnappers. Their weapons, built for conventional warfare, had no targets to fire at. Days passed, then weeks. More children disappeared. The pattern continued, always moving inward, always skipping human settlements. Suman Bay, a human observer stationed aboard the Velthani flagship Crystal Dawn, watched the aliens' growing desperation with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. The Velthani had deployed their most advanced ships, vessels that could fold space-time itself, but they were no closer to finding the missing children than when they started. Your people's technology is impressive, she told Commander Zephyr, the ship's captain, but maybe you need a different approach. The crystal being's body flickered with patterns that Suman had learned meant annoyance. What could primitive humans suggest that we have not already considered? Sometimes the best way to solve a puzzle is to stop looking at it like a machine and start looking at it like a mystery, Suman said. Who benefits from taking the children? What do they want? Why are they doing this now? We have considered all logical possibilities, Zephyr replied. This is clearly the work of some unknown enemy, using technology we do not understand. Or, Suman said quietly, maybe it's someone using technology you understand very well, so well that you don't think to look for it. But the Velthani captain dismissed her suggestion. Just like the other alien commanders dismissed similar advice from human observers, they were too proud to admit that primitive humans might see something they had missed. Back on Earth, a small team of investigators was working quietly on the problem. They didn't have access to the aliens' advanced sensors or faster-than-light communication networks. What they had was something the aliens seemed to have forgotten, the ability to think like hunters instead of technicians. Hu Jin Lim led the team from a cramped basement office in Seoul. He was a former police detective who had specialized in missing persons cases. The tools of his trade were simple: intuition, patience, and the ability to spot patterns that others missed. Look at this, he said to his team, pointing at a holographic display of the galaxy. Everyone's focusing on the missing children, but what about what's being left behind? Yaren Shin, the team's archaeologist, leaned forward. What do you mean? At every site where children disappeared, there are traces of something old, really old. The aliens keep dismissing these traces as background radiation or natural phenomena. But what if they're not? Yaren's eyes widened. The void gates. Exactly. Woojin pulled up another set of data. Every disappearance site is within 100 light-years of a void gate. The aliens think those are just ancient ruins. But what if they're not ruins at all? What if they're still active? The void gates were mysterious structures found throughout the galaxy, massive rings of some unknown material that most species assumed were left behind by a long-dead civilization. They were so old that even the ancient Velthani had no records of who built them. If you're right, Yaren said slowly, then we're not dealing with some unknown enemy. We're dealing with the people who built those gates, the progenitors. But the progenitors vanished millions of years ago, protested Kunhun Nam, the team's xenobiologist. Did they, Wu Jin asked, or did they just go to sleep, waiting for the right time to wake up? As if to answer his question, long-range sensors detected massive energy readings from the galactic core. Something was happening near the largest cluster of void gates ever discovered, and it was big enough to be detected from thousands of light years away. The hunt was about to begin, but the hunters and the hunted weren't who anyone expected them to be. The greatest military forces in galactic history assembled within days of the energy readings from the core. Sumin Bei watched from the observation deck of the Velthani flagship as hundreds of ships took formation in space. It was a sight that should have filled her with confidence, but instead, she felt a growing sense of dread. The Velthani had sent their crystal dreadnought ships the size of cities that could bend space itself. Their hulls were made of the same living crystal as their creators, able to repair themselves and adapt to any attack. The lead ship, Eternal Radiance, was commanded by Admiral Kethmer, whose crystal body had grown for over 1,000 years. The Korthok bioships were even more impressive in their own terrifying way. These vessels were alive, grown rather than built, with hulls that could change shape to meet any threat. The largest Hive Mother carried 10,000 Korthok warriors in its living chambers. It could spawn smaller ships from its own body if needed. Most frightening of all were the Zephyrian energy fleets. Pure beings of light and power, they didn't need ships at all. They traveled through space as dancing clouds of energy, capable of moving at nearly the speed of light. Their leader, Velthasian the Bright, was said to be older than most stars. Impressive, Sumin said to Admiral Kethmer as they watched the fleets form up. The crystal being's body pulsed with confident blue light. The combined might of 3 galactic civilizations. Whatever enemy has taken our children will face power beyond their understanding. I hope you're right, Sumin replied. But something in her gut told her they were making a mistake. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward the galactic core where the energy readings had originated. It should have been a journey of days, but their advanced technology got them there in hours. What they found waiting for them was nothing. Sensors show no hostile ships, reported the Korthok hive mind from their biovasal. No energy signatures matching any known technology. The area appears empty. Then where did the energy readings come from? Demanded Velthasian, his voice crackling across all communication channels. The answer came when they detected the void gates. There were dozens of them arranged in a perfect sphere around a dead star. Each gate was massive, large enough for a capital ship to fly through and made of some dark material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. The ancient gates are active, whispered Admiral Kethmer, his usually confident voice shaking. After millions of years, they're working again. As if responding to his words, one of the gates began to pulse with dark energy. Something was coming through. All ships' battle stations, ordered Kethmer, prepare to engage unknown contacts. What emerged from the gate wasn't a ship, it was a creature, if it could be called that. It looked like a massive jellyfish made of shadows and starlight, easily as large as a Velthani dreadnought. Tentacles of pure darkness stretched out from its body, and where they touched space itself, reality seemed to bend and twist. By the crystal throne, breathed Kethmer, what is that thing? More creatures emerged from other gates. Dozens of them, each one different but equally impossible. Some looked like dragons made of folded spacetime. Others resembled spiders, with legs that stretched across light years. All of them radiated the same dark energy that made the sensors scream warnings. Open fire, ordered Admiral Kethmer. The combined fleets unleashed hell. Crystal cannons that could shatter planets fired beams of pure destruction. Bioships launched living weapons that could adapt to any defense. The Zephyrians themselves became weapons, turning their energy forms into blazing spears of light. The weapons passed harmlessly through the shadow creatures. Impossible, muttered the Korthok hive mind. Our adaptive weapons should work on any form of matter or energy. They're not made of matter or energy as we understand it. Suman realized with growing horror. There's something else entirely. The shadow creatures didn't attack back. Instead, they simply moved toward the fleet, and wherever they touched, the great warships, those ships began to dim and slow. Sumin watched in horror as the hive mother was touched by one of the spider-like beings. The massive bioship, which had been pulsing with healthy green light, began to turn gray. Its living holes started to shrivel, and the thousands of Korthok warriors inside began screaming as their life force was drained away. Retreat, ordered Admiral Kethmer, but it was too late. The jellyfish creature reached the crystal dawn before they could jump to hyperspace. Its dark tentacles wrapped around the ship's crystal hull, and Sumin felt the temperature drop as something vital was pulled from the air itself. All around her, the Velthani crew began to dim. Their usually bright crystal bodies grew dark and cold. Admiral Kethmer tried to give orders, but his voice was barely a whisper. Emergency jump, Suman shouted, into the ship's communication system. Get us out of here now. The ship's emergency systems, designed to work even when the crew was incapacitated, activated the hyperspace drive. The Crystal Dawn escaped, but barely. Of the hundreds of ships that had entered the battle, less than 50 made it out. Meanwhile, Back in human space, Wujin Lim's investigation team was making their own discoveries. Working from their basement office in Seoul, they had been analyzing the patterns of disappearances when the military reports started coming in. The alien fleets were defeated, reported Kunshin Nam, reading from an intercepted military transmission. Massive casualties. Unknown enemy using weapons that drain life force directly. Life force, repeated Yerin Shin. That's the key, isn't it? Someone is collecting life energy from the children, and now they're taking it from adult soldiers. Tu Wujin nodded grimly. But why? What do they need all that energy for? The answer came from an unexpected source. Minyuk Choi, a human archaeologist working on Kepler 442b, had been studying Voidgate fragments when the attack happened. He was one of the few witnesses to survive a close encounter with the shadow creatures. His report when it reached Earth changed everything. The creature spoke to me. Minyuk's shaking voice came through the transmission. Not in words, but directly into my mind. It called itself the Collector. It said it had been sleeping for eons, waiting for the galaxy to refill with suitable life forms. Wujin felt his blood turn to ice. Did it say anything else? It said the young ones it took were being prepared for a great purpose. Their life energy would be used to create something new. But first, it had to deal with the old enemies who might interfere. The old enemies being the current galactic civilizations, Yerin concluded. But why leave humans alone? Asked Kunhun. Minyuk's voice dropped to a whisper. Because we're not old enemies, we're new to the galaxy. The Collector sees us as ... pure, untainted by the ancient wars. It wants to use human children as the foundation for whatever it's creating. The team sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. The alien civilizations, with all their advanced technology and military might, were fighting a war they couldn't win against an enemy that saw them as obstacles to be removed. But humanity, dismissed as primitive and worthless, was being saved for something far worse. We have to warn them, Kunghun said. Warn who? Wujin asked, bitterly. The aliens who laughed at us 3 weeks ago, who called us primitive children, playing with toys. Even if they did, Yerin added, what could we do? If their advanced fleets can't stop this Collector, what chance do we have? But even as she said it, Wujin was already thinking. The aliens had failed because they relied on their technology, their weapons, their traditional ways of fighting. But what if the solution wasn't about having better weapons or stronger shields? What if it was about understanding the enemy instead of just trying to destroy it? Get me a direct line to Admiral Kethma, Wujin said suddenly. And contact Captain Doyen Yu on the Soul's Pride. If we're going to have any chance of stopping this thing, we need to do what humans do best, which is, asked Yerin. Wujin smiled grimly. Improvise. Getting Admiral Kethma to listen was harder than stopping a war. The proud Velthani commander had lost 2/3 of his fleet to the shadow creatures, and his crystal body was still dim from the life-draining attack. The last thing he wanted was advice from primitive humans. You offer words when we need weapons, Kethma said, his voice barely audible through the communication link. Your species has no understanding of the forces we face. Wujin sat in his cramped office looking at the holographic image of the dying alien admiral. Behind Kethma, the bridge of the Crystal Dawn was filled with dimmed Velthani officers, their once bright bodies now gray and lifeless. Admiral, with respect, your weapons didn't work, Wujin said calmly. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. What approach could humans possibly? The approach of actually understanding your enemy instead of just shooting at it, interrupted Ji Sung-han, the team's newest member. The young physicist had joined them just days before, but he had already proven invaluable. Admiral Kethma's body flickered with what Sumin had taught the team was suppressed anger. You dare lecture me on Admiral? Sumin's voice came through the link from the bridge of the Crystal Dawn. Maybe we should listen. Our way isn't working. Kethma fell silent, and Wujin took the opportunity to present their findings. We've been analyzing the pattern of attacks, Wujin began, pulling up a holographic display of the galaxy, the disappearances, the void gate activations, even the locations where your fleets were attacked. It's not random, it's surgical, precise, like someone who knows exactly what they're doing. The Collector, whispered Yerin, and everyone in the room felt a chill. Ji Sung stepped forward. We think we know what it is, not what it wants, what it actually is. He manipulated the display, showing energy readings from various Voidgate sites. Look at these patterns. The energy signatures match theoretical models for beings that exist partially outside normal spacetime. The progenitors weren't just an ancient race, they were beings who had evolved beyond physical existence. But they're still alive, added Suyan Kong, the team's xenopsychologist who had joined the Corps from her lab on Mars, and they're using the void gates as anchor points to interact with our reality. Admiral Kethma's body pulsed weakly. If this is true, then our weapons are useless. How do you fight something that exists beyond physical reality? You don't fight it, Wujin said quietly. You understand it, and then you find a way to make it not want to fight you. Over the next several hours, the human team shared everything they had discovered. The Collector wasn't just any was the last survivor of a civil war that had destroyed their entire civilization millions of years ago. The other galactic races were descended from species that had sided against the progenitors in that ancient conflict. It sees you as the children of its enemies, Su Yang explained. That's why it's draining the life force from your people. It's finishing a war that started before your civilizations even existed. But humans are different, added Ji-sung. We're newcomers. We have no connection to that ancient war. To the collector, we represent something pure, a chance to start over, which is why it's saving us for last, Woojin concluded grimly. It wants to use human children as the genetic foundation for a new civilization. One it can control from the beginning. The silence that followed was broken by Admiral Kethmer's weak voice. Then we are all doomed. If our weapons cannot touch it, and it can drain our life force at will. Not necessarily, interrupted a new voice. Captain Doyan, you had joined the call from the Soul's Pride, which was currently hiding in the asteroid belt of a dead system. I've been thinking about what we saw at the Zephyrian Sanctuary. The collector drained the adults, but it was careful with the children, gentle even. Your point? Asked Kethma. It doesn't want to destroy everything, Doyan said. It wants to preserve something. That means it has limits. Rules it follows, and rules can be used against the people who make them. Su Yang leaned forward. Captain Yu is right. The collector isn't acting out of pure malice. It's acting out of a twisted sense of purpose. It believes it's saving the galaxy by replacing the current civilizations with something better. But what if we could convince it that it's wrong? Woojin asked. What if we could show it that the current civilizations aren't the same as the ancient enemies it fought? How Kethmer's voice was barely a whisper now. The answer came from an unexpected source. Mingi Choi, the young xenobiologist who had been at the original council meeting, had been monitoring the communications from Earth. Her voice cut through the discussion like a laser. We give it what it wants, she said simply. Everyone stared at her holographic image. Explain, Woojin said carefully. The collector wants to create a new civilization using human children as the foundation. But what if the human children don't want to cooperate? What if they fight back from the inside? That's suicide, protested Admiral Kethma. No, Minji said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's evolution. She explained her plan quickly. Human children were indeed different from alien. Young, they developed faster, learned quicker, and most importantly, they had something the collector had never encountered before. The human capacity for stubborn, illogical rebellion. You want to use children as weapons? So Yang asked, horrified. I want to use children as teachers, Mingi corrected. The collector has been alone for millions of years. It's forgotten what it means to interact with minds that can think independently. Human children don't just learn, they question, they argue, they refuse to accept things just because an adult tells them to. Woojin began to understand. You think the children can change the collector's mind? I think the children can remind it what it lost when it chose power over connection, Mingi said. But they'll need help. They'll need someone to show them how to use the collector's own technology against it. Who asked? Ji-sung. Minji's smile became real for the first time. Me. The plan that emerged was insane by any reasonable standard. Minji would allow herself to be captured along with a group of human children. Once inside the collector's stronghold, she would teach the children how to reverse the life-draining process that powered the ancient being. It's impossible, Admiral Kethma protested weakly. Even if the children could learn to use progenitor technology, the collector would stop them, would it? Asked Su Yang. The collector sees human children as pure, innocent. It wants to protect them, not harm them. That protective instinct might be the only thing powerful enough to override its survival instincts. And if you're wrong? Doyan asked quietly. Minji was quiet for a long moment. Then at least we'll have tried something the galaxy has never seen before, which is faith in the next generation. As the call ended and plans began to form, none of them knew that the collector was already preparing for the final phase of its plan. Deep in its stronghold near the galactic core, surrounded by thousands of captured children from dozens of species, the ancient being was growing stronger with each passing hour, but it was also growing curious about the strange, new species that had appeared in its galaxy. The humans were different from anything it had encountered before. They were weak but persistent, primitive but clever, divided but united when it mattered. Most intriguingly, they were the only species that had come looking for their children. Instead of just trying to destroy their captor, the collector began to wonder what it might learn from these curious creatures before it absorbed their life force and started over with a clean slate. It would soon find out that some lessons are more dangerous than any weapon. The collector's message reached every human colony at the same time, appearing on screens and communication devices across human space. The voice was ancient beyond measure, speaking directly into the minds of everyone who heard it. Children of the new evolution, it said, and the words seemed to echo from the depths of space itself. I am the last of the progenitors, the final guardian of what once was and what shall be again. Your young ones will become the foundation of a perfect civilization, freed from the conflicts and hatred that destroyed my people. Captain Byung-ho Lee watched the message from the bridge of the human destroyer Inshan's Wrath. Around him, his crew sat in stunned silence as the impossible being continued speaking. Surrender your children willingly, and your species will be preserved to serve as caretakers of the new order. Resist, and you will share the fate of all those who have chosen war over wisdom. The message ended, leaving humanity with an ultimatum that no parent could accept and no military could ignore. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Yunji Park from the pilot's station, "we're receiving similar messages from all human ships and colonies. Earth Command is asking for immediate response." Byung-ho looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, alien children from dozens of species were being held prisoner by something older than their civilizations, and now it was coming for human children too. "Send a message to all human ships," he said quietly. "We don't negotiate with kidnappers. We don't surrender our children, and we sure as hell don't give up without a fight." But even as he spoke the brave words, Byung-ho knew the truth that every human commander was facing. Their combined fleets were no match for the power that had defeated the greatest military forces in galactic history. The Collector had weapons beyond their understanding and abilities that defied the laws of physics. What they had was something the Collector couldn't understand: the absolute refusal to abandon their young. 3 days later, the human fleet assembled near the galactic core. It was a pathetic sight compared to the alien armadas that had come before. 43 ships of various sizes, most of them converted cargo haulers and mining vessels. Their weapons were chemical rockets and kinetic projectiles primitive by galactic standards. Leading them was the Inchin's Wrath, a destroyer that would have been considered obsolete 50 years ago. Behind it came ships with names like Bison's Courage, Daegu's Determination, and Soul's Pride. Each one carried volunteers who knew they were probably flying to their deaths. "This is insane," muttered Sergeant Gun-Yuk-oh as he checked his equipment. For the 10th time, the Marine was leading the boarding party that would try to reach the captured children if they somehow managed to penetrate the Collector's defenses. "Probably," agreed Corporal Hunyu Jiang, testing the detonators on his explosive charges. "But it's our kind of insane." The human fleet approached the sphere of void gates where the Collector waited. As they drew closer, the gates began to pulse with dark energy, and the shadow creatures emerged once again. "All ships, this is Captain Lee Bujang-ho broadcast on all frequencies. Remember, we're not here to win a battle. We're here to buy time for the boarding parties to reach the children. Every minute we hold their attention is another minute for our people to work." The shadow creatures moved toward the human fleet with the same terrifying grace they had shown against the alien armadas, but something was different this time. Instead of firing their most powerful weapons, the human ships began to scatter. "Evasive maneuvers," ordered Lieutenant Yunji Park. Pattern Delta Spin, the Inchin's Wrath spun and dove, its smaller size allowing it to move in ways the massive alien warships couldn't. Around it, the other human vessels followed suit, breaking formation and moving in seemingly random patterns. The shadow creatures, accustomed to fighting enemies that stood and traded firepower, were confused by the human tactics. They reached out with their life-draining abilities, but the humans were no longer where they expected them to be. "Now," shouted Captain Lee. The human ships opened fire, but not at the shadow creatures. Instead, they targeted the void gates themselves, concentrating their primitive but effective weapons on the ancient structures that served as anchor points for the Collector's power. "Impossible." The Collector's voice echoed across space as one of the gates began to crack under the concentrated kinetic bombardment. "Those weapons cannot harm progenitor technology." But the humans weren't trying to destroy the gates with superior firepower. They were using simple physics applying focused pressure to structural weak points, the same way a hammer could crack a diamond if you hit it just right. As the first gate shattered, the shadow creatures defending it flickered and began to fade. The Collector's connection to physical reality was weakening. "Boarding parties, go," ordered Captain Lee. Small shuttles launched from the human ships, racing toward the largest of the remaining gates. Leading them was Sergeant O's team, followed by volunteers from every human colony. But they weren't alone. Inside the Collector's stronghold, Mingi Choi and the captured children were ready. She had been taken 3 days earlier, just as planned, along with 27 human children between the ages of 8 and 15. The Collector had placed them in a vast chamber with children from dozens of other species, all of them connected to strange machines that slowly drained their life force. But while the alien children had become weak and listless, the human children had done something unexpected. They had started to explore. Miss Minji whispered 10-year-old Sujin Nam, "I think I figured out how these machines work." Minji looked at the complex progenitor technology surrounding them. "Show me." Sujin pointed to a series of crystalline nodes that pulsed with energy. "They're not just taking our life force, they're storing it. Look, there's a pattern. Every time one of us gets tired, that crystal gets brighter. And if we could reverse the flow," Mingi asked, "then instead of draining us, the machines would feed energy back," concluded 12-year-old Hunwoo, who had been listening. "But we'd need to change the settings somehow." The answer came from an unexpected source. The Collector itself, curious about these strange new subjects, had been monitoring their conversations. When it realized what the children were discussing, it appeared in their chamber as a swirling mass of dark energy. "Clever little ones," it said, its voice like wind through ancient ruins, "but you cannot comprehend the complexity of progenitor technology. It took my people millions of years to master these systems. Maybe, said Sujin boldly, but we don't need to master them. We just need to break them. The collector paused, confused by the child's logic. Break them, but that would free everyone. Hyunwoo finished. All the kids you took, all the